The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
So this is The Unlikely Innovators. I'm one of the Unlikely Innovators. The other is next to me.
Hello.
I'm Steve Gravel, and we're from the frozen north. We're from Sudbury, about 4 hours north of here. And we're really happy to have with us today Humza Teherany from MLSE. We can't wait to dive in, but just a few words about the podcast. So we started the podcast, for those of you who aren't super fans like some I see in the audience, in 2019 during the pandemic, which is the best time to start a podcast, I think. And we've been chugging ever since. And I think what we want to focus on is not only unlikely sources of innovation, but people with unlikely tales of how they got into innovation. And I think today we definitely have a guest that matches that.
Absolutely. We do have a shot clock here, so it's very apropos. So we want to get into it right away, but I think before we do that, we wanted to give a proper introduction to Humza. So Humza is the Chief Technology and Digital Officer at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Humza has over 20 years of experience in driving technology and business strategy while directly contributing to both top and bottom line results. Humza's organization at MLSE is responsible for strategy, business analytics, IT and technology, cybersecurity, and digital innovation, including esports. MLSE Digital Labs is one of the largest and deepest technology and digital organizations in professional sports. Humza represents the Toronto Raptors on the NBA's Team Innovation Advisory Council. The TIAC is responsible for driving innovation and best practices at the NBA level in collaboration with the league. Humza has an undergraduate degree from York University and holds various professional training accreditations from both the Schulich School of Business and the Niagara Institute. He's also served as president of the CIO Association of Canada and was recently awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by the organization for his contributions to the Canadian tech ecosystem. So we couldn't think of a better Toronto tech guy to have at a Toronto tech conference. So we're really pleased to have Humza join us right now for the Unlikely Innovators.
Thank you for having me.
I think I'm trying to hold in my excitement because we were talking a bit beforehand, but this is kind of the perfect episode for Mike and I because inevitably we end up talking about sports and technology. So this is the perfect confluence of those two worlds. So thanks so much for joining us. We'll just get right to it, I think. A lot of the times when we have our guests on, we think about that question of, the what did you want to be when you grew up question, but I'll put a finer point on it for you. Did you always think that you'd get into IT and tech when you were growing up, or was that a bit of a winding journey for you?
It wasn't exactly. Yeah, it was a winding journey, I think, for me. When I was at York University doing an undergrad, I actually had no idea what I wanted to do, and I did an arts degree, so I had a kind of a wide-ranging education, but was always interested in technology, and growing up as a kid, I was always tinkering with stuff, breaking stuff, tearing things apart. My parents weren't too happy with all of those things because some of those things would be their things that I was tearing apart. And then I remember when the internet and YouTube and being able to learn and self-learn with various places to go to do that kind of really opened the doors for me to just learn. And I've taken that into even, where I am with my career now. It's about learning, and not only learning from an ecosystem and people that are around you, but people that are doing new things that, I have no idea about. So I probably consume more YouTube than any other kind of media, but I'm watching all kinds of things on there. And that's really what got me into technology, and both on the hardware and software and technology side, and now multiple industries, and I've learned a lot, and I continue to learn a lot. It's an exciting time, though, to be in tech in 2024.
And actually, I wanted to just, thinking about your background, Steve and I are both history majors, and we've often talked about how, the tech and STEM could use more people from humanities. Just a quick question around that, how has maybe your arts training that you had from York, how have you seen that kind of help you in a career that maybe you hadn't envisioned when you started?
I don't know that it did.
Okay.
I think where it did help me, joking aside, I think it helped on the people side of things. And, I think every job you're in has an element of sales and public relations. And I think that's an important skill set to have if you're, I think the hard skills are obviously important. So I taught myself how to code. I taught myself how to build hardware. I don't have a comp sci degree, but I like to think I can hold my own with, a lot of people, and that was because I had a passion for it, and I spent hours on it, and I still spend hours on it, and I think that's important. But I think the softer skills are equally important in business. And at a certain point in my career, I was really interested in coming out of hardcore technology, and I did everything from in the telecom space and the software space of helping to build IP networks here in Canada in my telco careers, the launch of IPTV when it first came out, software development, product R&D, and then really got this almost like a bit of a secret sauce in terms of what gets me going, which is applying those things to growing businesses. And then I had all these opportunities to take my technology skills and innovation skills and apply them to growing businesses. And that's really where I found my passion, and the intersection of those two things. So I think my arts degree taught me the softer skills and gave me a bit more runway into it. But I would say the self-learning is continued on both the soft skills and the hard skills. I think it's important to continually learn and immerse yourself in different environments that you can take things away from in your own life.
I hope to have skills one day too. That would be immensely beneficial to me.
You're getting there. Every day I'm impressed by what you're able to do.
We'll do applause break so you know when I'm joking, folks.
But we want, you're talking about helping businesses, and one of the things I've heard you say in a previous podcast was that you think of yourself as a business person first, who happens to also have a vocation in IT and technology. And I think at DiscoveryX, we have a lot of entrepreneurs and founders that are here. Can you maybe talk a little about that approach and that mentality? I think a lot of people here would consider themselves, within the vocation they have, but I think that business mentality is important, that regardless of what you're doing and what your vocation is, that you're always thinking about business, however you're trying to apply that.
Well, I think if you have technology skills today, whether you're in high school or whether you're in university or whether you've started your career in midstream or you're in later stream, you have an edge immediately, because any company in the world today is leveraging technology to drive bottom line efficiency and top line revenue growth, or whatever your other marker might be on growth. But it's those people that can actually take the technology and figure out what to do with it. Like, tech isn't the hard part. It's difficult in some cases when you think about everything that's happening with AI or Gen AI and where that could go. Like, those are not easy things. So I'm not trying to trivialize the technology part of it, but it's work to be done. But translating those things in, like, how would you use some of those advanced technologies in healthcare? It's complicated because you have politics and red tape and government and things you can do and things you can't do, and right? In a private company, you might have politics. You might have a bit of incumbency and people that are like, yeah, I don't want to do that thing because I have my army over here that's doing the thing already. And it's those people that can actually break through those barriers and drive the innovation into actual usage. And I would say, in sports, when I got an opportunity to come to MLSE 6 years ago now, my group didn't exist in the way it does today. And I think we had this opportunity to look at how can we use technology to drive differentiation on the ice, on the pitch, on the court, from a sports performance perspective. And equally, how do you take a fairly sizable sports and entertainment company? We were the largest in the world or one of the largest in North America when I joined, and we are still one of the largest in North America with the multitude of teams and venues and access. But how do you take an organization with such historic prowess and move it forward? And you have to do that by strategy and structure, and then backing in the technology into the great ideas. And you have to do it with the people that sit around a table in a business. And if you're a startup founder here and you're trying to sell your solutions in, you got to sell it in understanding how you're going to transform somebody's business, or an investor's portfolio for that matter. You always got to reverse engineer it. And there is a real skill and art to doing that. And it varies from industry to industry, to person to person.
Yeah, I want to pick up on sort of your journey to MLSE 6 years ago. Believe it or not, I've never been drafted into a professional sports team. And I can speak for most people, indeed in the world, that's a very rare thing. But I think when you get the call, I don't know if it was an interview process that you went through, but when you get the call that it's going to be a reality, for those of us that haven't been fortunate enough to be drafted into a league, that's got to be darn close to that same feeling. Just walk us through like that process and then the feeling of joining such a great organization.
Yeah, so wild and out of this world and unplanned is the best way. Unlikely Innovators, I guess, right? Just to bring that back.
That's the name of the show.
Yeah, right. So I was actually at a really large company, a really large behind-the-scenes company called Compass Group. And Compass Group is a retail hospitality company. They're very much behind-the-scenes company, but globally one of the largest companies in the world, close to 500,000 employees in 30 countries. I joined there. I spent about the same amount of time there, and I grew a technical and digital innovation group, similar to what I built now at MLSE in retail, hospitality, and food service, which was the previous organization, and built this innovation company that was helping to drive revenue and profit and efficiency and innovation in one of the largest companies in the world. I built that portion of that group in Canada with about 30 people. And ultimately, we expanded it into the U.S. group, and 5 or 6 years later, it was 250 people in 2 countries. I was named CEO of that organization, so I was one of the CEOs in this massive, giant company. And as a tech person, to be in the CEO chair of a venture was amazing, right? You get to really take the business and the tech and put them together, and it was great. Everything was working really well. We were thinking about expanding it globally in the world of Compass. And then I get a phone call from a recruiter saying, "Hey, we have this opportunity," and it was this opportunity with MLSE. And I grew up in, for those of you that are from Toronto, I grew up in Scarborough. I come from an immigrant family. My parents came here with $1,000 in their pocket. They ran a travel company for 30 years. My parents grounded out for 30 years just to give my brother and I an opportunity to grow and have opportunity as well. I owe my parents a lot. I learned a lot about business, in fact, from my parents as well. I would say my business education came from my schooling, but probably 50% of it came from watching my parents and just seeing what they did to really grow what became, I think, in the heyday a fairly reasonable medium-sized business. It's pretty great to see. I'm really proud of what they achieved here and what they contributed to Canadian society. But as a kid in Scarborough, shooting hoops in my driveway, dreaming of playing in the NBA, and I did play in high school. I obviously didn't make it to the pros. They told me I wasn't big and tall enough, but I think the game has now changed. So I feel like if I was 21 and it was 2024, I might be like Marquise Noel, who's shorter than me and made it to the league. Anyway, that dream aside, you get an opportunity to come in, and really it was our ownership group at the time that was really interested in planting a flag here in Toronto, given all of the great things we are in Toronto around tech. And they were like, "Listen, we have this incredible organization, but we're not leveraging digital and technology, and we want to use it for a couple of things. We want to use it to grow our business. We want to use it to grow our competitiveness around teams, but it was pretty loose." And they were like, "We'd like you to come here, and we'd like you to do something similar to what you did at Compass in sports." That set up a process of 13 interviews, and one of the longest interview processes I think I've ever.
If anyone's waiting for a call right now, from a recruiter or from 13 is a lot.
13's a lot. But getting to the end of that process, I think it proved that the organization was really serious about doing this, and they would give me a fair bit of autonomy to come in and not only build a culture of innovation and a culture of improving our business, but also working with our teams, which was just pretty cool. Right at that point, it was still about Moneyball kind of stuff, and we had this concept of really bringing Moneyball up, where you had data and visualization, but it was about decision making and less about the hardcore data. And for me, career-wise, it was like a sharp right turn. Do I leave an industry that I'm well established in, that I'm sitting pretty much at the top of the thing that I want to do, and try something different? And the reason I made the change was twofold. One is to prove that I could do it again, because it's hard and in a different industry. And number two, I think it was it was a dream to work in professional sports, and I've never looked back. I value all my experiences, but I think what we've built at MLSE is really cool. It's renowned across the leagues. It's known across leagues and teams, and I give credit to achieving that to my team, because it's the people that make up an organization. It's the people that make up the things that you do, and we've done some really great things. We've got incredible men and women in our organization that are really pushing the boundaries of sport. We've got some really diverse teams as well, and they're doing it, from here in Toronto at 50 Bay Street, just right next to the arena, which is pretty cool. So proud of all of that, but an unlikely journey, definitely an unlikely journey that I couldn't have predicted if you'd asked me 10 or 12 years ago.
Well, I was draft eligible in 2003. I'm still waiting for my call, but I understand that the prerequisite to be drafted by the Leafs is you have to actually be good at hockey, and I haven't quite figured that out yet.
I don't know about that.
No, you don't have to humor me.
I'm throwing shade at your team, actually.
Oh, we're not doing that. So, we talked offline. I showed you my socks. I'm wearing Austin Matthews socks. The Leafs are playing their final game tonight. As a fan, I'm interested in, some milestone moments tonight. But obviously, this is your daily, your work. This is what you do for a living. So we wanted to know, in terms of joining MLSE, over the last, 6 years or so, how has that changed your consumption of sport, from a fan perspective, right? This is obviously your job, but has your role changed the way that you view sport, just generally, and your consumption of it?
Yeah, I follow everything. I'm a bit of a social media junkie in terms of information, like valuable information, not just scrolling Instagram, although I do that sometimes too, but not much anymore. But there's so much, we have so many teams and so many sports and so many things going on. But, if you were to see our executive team, everybody's responsible in that executive team for doing something that they're the prime on, they're great at. But at the end of the day, I think that group of people that sits around the table to discuss where we are as MLSE is thinking about the entire thing. And while my group, we create software and analytics and data and some really advanced stuff, even around augmented reality and the way we train, the way we scout, the way we coach, the way we manage performance for players. We do that in conjunction with our front office. And I would say, guys like Brendan Shanahan and Masai as our colleagues in that executive group, and Bill Manning, of course, from the Argos and TFC, they're super bought in from a culture standpoint of the value of doing these things. So then it opens up the door for, what do we want to do, right? How do we want to take our capabilities and extend them? And I think we have opportunities here in Toronto that, if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm not sure you have the ecosystem we do here. No disrespect to Oklahoma City if anybody's from there. But I think we just have this unique position in Toronto around science, technology, health sciences, and just raw, pure innovation. So I think everybody at that table shows up as a steward of the company and trying to figure out, how do we grow the organization? How do we drive competitiveness? How do we attract players to come to Toronto and want to be here, which I think is... People want to be here. People want to be in the city. People want to play in the city. But it's very much a business-focused discussion. And I think people's vocations of what they... obviously, I don't make the calls on players, for sure. But I think everybody has a role to influence the state of where we're headed.
Yeah, and you mentioned the teams that make up MLSE. And I think they have some things in common, each of those sports. One of them being that people sit in stands to see them live, but apart from that, there's some distinct things, and not all of the fans overlap. So when you're thinking about sort of a cohesive technology and digital strategy across those sports, how does one navigate that? It's not an ownership group that owns one kind of team, right? So if you could reflect on some of the differences and how you manage that.
We have two different sides of our organization. I think one side is we've built over the last couple of years a digital sports performance lab. And it's run by the former head of analytics for TFC, who now works at MLSE. And it's all connected, so it doesn't matter. But it's cool to see somebody from the team come in and run this group. And that group basically brings together software engineering, UX, UI, machine learning, AI, all the capabilities and skill sets, and brings together our sports scientists from across our teams, and really ideas around training, performance, drafting, scouting, and injury prevention. And we were chatting prior, right? Injury prevention is one of the intangibles that doesn't necessarily have a direct return on investment until you're deep in the playoffs and your players are less injured than the other team. So we focus heavily on collaborating with our front offices. Each of our front offices has dedicated analytics people in the team that are doing a lot of the day-to-day stuff around an NBA season or an NHL season or Major League Soccer season or Argo season. And then you've got doctors, you've got physio, you've got basically health and wellness people across each of those teams that's looking after our players. And then, of course, you've got shooting coaches and all kinds of different coaches that are doing different things depending on the sport. So our goal over the last 6 years has been to be immersed in those environments, to work with those folks. And going back to the hardcore tech skills versus the softer skills, it's our job to extract, by working with all these incredible people, their ideas, what's in their head. Alex, for those of you that follow the NBA, Alex McKechnie is our lead our sports scientist on the Raptors side of things. And love it or hate it was, I think, one of the originators of load management. And has trained Shaq and Kobe and Kawhi, and if you look him up, he's got like just a storied past of things he's done in professional sports. So to sit with Alex, who's an incredible human, and to get into his head about how do you go about keeping Kawhi healthy, as an example, in an NBA playoff championship run, and then how do we take that information from his head and replicate and create IP that I won't be able to talk more about necessarily more than this, but we have then the ability to create these IP components that our teams can use to do the thing they already do. It's not an overlay. It just helps them be better at scouting, coaching, drafting, player performance, and all these kinds of things. And that's been one of the keys on working with our teams. The other part is things like injury prevention and the way players move and the biomechanics of how players move are consistent data points, regardless of what you're doing, even if you're walking around as a human without playing sports. So there's a lot of consistencies we can see when we look at a use case in basketball, hockey, or soccer. And we're more and more taking learnings from one sport to another, and at least having those conversations. Sometimes it's like, no, it's too different, we don't want to do it that way. But other times it's like, oh, that's kind of interesting, and we might be really far ahead if we do this. And as an example, in hockey, if we tried something in basketball, or it could be with any of the other teams. And on the business side of things, it is all about conversation around where we want to go as a company. It's about how we want to continue to build environments for our fans, connectivity to players, fandom for our sports, connection into our communities, into the city, and also globally. Raptors are more of a global team, I think, than at least in our slate of teams. Raptors are an international team. And it's really about the strategy of how do we want to connect, how do we want to grow, and how do we want to foster. MLSE is one of the biggest and brightest in sports around leveraging new ideas and trying new things. So a lot about culture and collaboration and learning and failing as well, and then just continuing to iterate on that.
I think I could have a whole podcast. Something you said really piqued my interest. When you're talking about IP with some of that stuff, that's such an interesting piece that we don't have time to talk about. But that's such a fascinating tidbit I hadn't even considered when you're doing these kinds of things. So this is self-serving, and you'll have to bear with me, and I hope I land the plane on this, but give me a wide berth, so to speak. Sports and entertainment and technology have been inextricably linked, since the instant replay. If you could opine and think of something that you think has been sort of a breakthrough in sports and technology, what would that sort of one thing that you go back to as a sense of inspiration? You mentioned Moneyball. That's a very inspiring movie with a very inspiring story. Do you have anything like that sort of guides you sort of inspirationally?
Yeah, I think about that a couple times a week. Because it's such an open playing field. I think the biggest one in the last couple of years has been leagues investing in data platforms and providing that as a source of streaming information off of the court, the ice, and the pitch. The NBA has been doing it with several companies, Second Spectrum, Hawkeye. The NHL built puck and player tracking recently. We actually helped the league in a third-party capacity build out some of that capability. We also helped to build the new NHL app that just launched this year. The NHL collaborated with us to build. We built a lot of the back end for that, so we're proud of some of the work we're doing industry-wide as well. But sensor data on player performance has been game-changing because you can see so much about what's happening on a basketball court, on the pitch, or on an ice surface. And I know that analytics organizations inside the NBA, NHL, Major League Soccer have been using that information now to take it and create information and insight and make decisions on it. And whether that's injury prevention or load management of some kind, or other elements. And then more recently, in the last year and a half, the NBA's gotten all in on biomechanic data. And biomechanic data is basically your body pose information. And your body pose information for some of the technology and software we've built in basketball, if there was a basketball net right there and all of us took three-pointers, you would be able to see the pose of your body in real time. So imagine your shot, but imagine yourself as a stick figure, right? And even though that sounds uninspirational, it shows how your joints and your biomech of your body is moving through a shot. And so if you're a shooting coach and Scotty Barnes is coming back from an injury and you're watching Scotty do free throws, you can actually in real time adjust the body pose of Scotty Barnes. That's crazy. Like it's actually happening now. And what happens on the competitive side is the league ensures that all teams have access to the same data sets, and then you can use it however you want, because then that's where your intelligence comes in of your organization, your strategy. And the biomech data, we think, is going to then proliferate through other leagues. And so we've been doing a lot with biomech data around injury prevention and performance enhancement. But on the fan experience side of things, you could imagine, like now you could see in a hockey game how fast a player is skating, time spent in the zone, face-offs won. There's a lot of cool things you could use that same information from. So I think that's going to change the immersion of how you consume sports. And as soon as things like the Vision Pro look more like your glasses, which will probably take at least 3 to 5 years, we've also been developing for the Vision Pro, and there's some really awesome things, but it's big and bulky and difficult today. But it's a window into where things are going. And so when you think of immersive experiences, AR, VR, from a fan experience perspective, and streaming data coming in where you have all of this other information outside of the linear broadcast you watch today, that stuff's going to continue to transform sports. And we're excited about playing a role in that.
Well, I know that yesterday Cody and Steve took some time at the end of the workday to have a 3-point shooting contest, and I think they could have probably used some of that technology. I'd love to see what their stick figures look like.
Yeah, I was, so I got a bit tired of dunking, so I backed up a bit and started taking some threes. But Cody did beat me.
Okay. It's on record now. Cody won.
He definitely won.
But you mentioned Apple Vision Pro and the work that is being done with the NBA. I think from a lot of us that are looking at it from an outsider perspective and as fans, that seems to be at the forefront of where we're going. And you talked about how that's only going to evolve. It's going to become more streamlined. If you had a crystal ball, where do you think it is going when it comes to other sports? Because I think what the NBA is doing, what the Raptors are doing, is really exciting, and there's a lot of room for growth. But if you had a projection of what you're able to share, where else do you see this immersive experience coming from, both, I guess, at home from a fan perspective, but also live at the venue?
Yeah, I think the technology is going to be, it will be really impactful in a couple of years. I think, have you guys tried the Vision Pro as an example?
I just watched it on YouTube.
YouTube. Anybody here tried the Vision Pro, actually?
It's not a tech conference if no one's tried it.
Just even the way, and we're developing we've been developing Oculus and Unreal, which was X-Real, if you know some of this hardware, and now Vision Pro, and we have a really close relationship with Apple from an R&D perspective. So we were able to do some really interesting things and be out there first on many of them. But I think from a fan perspective, the ability to, in the near future, to be able to put a live NBA game as a hologram on your coffee table and walk around it and watch it is around the corner.
That's insane.
I talked about that maybe 4 years ago as a concept, because I could envision that concept as something, we'd want to do in some way when the hardware was possible, and like it's possible now. Like, we've actually built some things in our lab that allow you to do that. It's just not fully polished from so those kinds of experiences, I think, are going to fundamentally change the way you're able to interact and consume sports. And it's not all going to be about sitting in your living room and watching sports. It's going to be really scalable to any environment you might be in, and it's going to be a really immersive environment. And it is really next level. I think the Vision Pro, and this is not all about Vision Pro because there's other technologies, but I think once it launches here in Canada sometime in the next several months, people will get a chance. But even the UX and the UI is really all about where you look. There's no like tapping on anything. You're looking with your eyeball, and you're navigating, and you're sitting there in this really immersive world. So I think that's going to be a really, really interesting thing when the actual hardware gets better. On the sports performance side, I think it's also going to be transformative, because if you think about, we installed at OVO Training Center where the Raptors play, not far from here, a giant, it's like a giant iPad on the wall. And it got a little bit of press when we launched it. It's probably the size of that whole wall there. It's a huge screen. And we run the software on there. We run some of our own algorithms and data science products and visualization products. We also run this thing called Noah, which allows our players to see in real time the analytics of the shots they're taking. How many went in, how many didn't. It provides us next level of information and data. Now imagine you have a coach reviewing game film, and the guys aren't sitting in a little theater watching game film. Everybody's immersed and watching a game. And in fact, earlier last year, we built a product with Amazon. We have a really close innovation program with Amazon called SportsX, sportsx.io, if you want to check out our website. And it's a funded program between MLSE and AWS. And one of the products we developed based on sensor data and integration with this hardware is this thing called interactive basketball experience. So you are able to put on a headset, be in our practice court, and see a live NBA game happening around you in augmented reality. So, and imagine running up and down the court with one of our players, and as they're pulling up to take a three-pointer, you're right next to them, and you're looking at them take a three-pointer in almost what looks like real life. So as a fan, that's cool. Yeah. But imagine when you're trying to explain to a player a coaching strategy or a development strategy or improvement strategy, you're now in that world. You're in that environment, and it's wildly different than sitting in a place like this watching a screen trying to, tell an athlete what he needs to do differently, because they don't always listen.
Yeah, right? I was going to say, when you're talking about Scotty Barnes',
they're going to want to know.
I don't want to be the guy to tell me.
Well, they're going to want to know the data. Right? I mean, like anybody would be like, well, tell me why you're telling me that. Like, show me how that's going to improve my game. Right? It's a logical question. Yeah. So when you're able to answer the question that way, different. And so I can tell you, our coaching staff is from Darko to our assistant coaches, and obviously our front office. Like, our organization is all in on things like that. So I think that's a credit to our ownership and our culture and our team presidents and our GMs and coaches. It has to filter all the way through the organization for people to want to listen to these ideas and participate.
I think, believe it or not, we'll have time for a couple questions from the audience, depending on how we stick handle this. Maybe not.
I've seen you try to land the plane before.
Yeah,
I think you should keep going.
I'll be brief. So I'm reminded of Michael Jordan hitting a shot over Craig Elo. And to look at that picture, as it's captured, everyone in the audience was waiting with bated breath for the outcome of that play. staring at the individuals on the court. If I fast forward to when Kawhi hit that shot to send them to the next round, everyone is on their phone or filming. Now, I'm not a fuddy-duddy or an old person. I'm hip, I'm young, I'm with it. I get sort of queasy when I think of technology invading the live sports space because it, in some ways, removes purity, but also adds to it. Can you sort of put my mind at ease that the live experience is going to still be awesome?
Yeah, I think for me the future is about optionality. We're never going to force you to do anything. If you want to sit in your seat and watch a game in the way it was done 60 years ago and pick your sport, go nuts. But if you want to have, like for me as a fan in the future, I'd love to have a pair of glasses that look like yours with streaming data coming in off the court. Basketball is my number one sport, and I love everything about it. So I want to know all the stats, not everything, but I want to be able to pick what hits me, and I want it to be just kind of in my periphery or kind of laid out in a way that is right next to a player and it gives me the information in the right spot to be able to enhance my viewing experience. I love that. Yeah. I'm a big Formula One fan, and you should see my house on a F1 Sunday with like various screens and things coming off of things I've hacked together. Yeah. But I think that's a sport that's actually doing it really well. And having a chance to actually meet some of the people that run those organizations for Formula One and being behind the scenes on some of how they do it, I think a lot of these things are already happening, but I think it's the way in which you provide the access to it, because nothing beats watching a hockey game. You know, Austin Matthews is going to try to hit 70 tonight. Like if you're in that arena, you want to be in that arena in the moment, right? But I do think it's about optionality, and it's about not invading the game with a giant headset that you wear, because then what's the point? You may as well be at home. And there's a fine balance of how we bring these things together. So hopefully that sets your mind at ease. We're not going to force you to do anything.
Yeah, I feel good. I feel good
now?
again.
He's okay now. That's good. Yeah. We did want to leave you with the last word, and I was thinking, we're at DiscoveryX, Ontario's premier tech and innovation conference. There's a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs and founders here. We've all received some various advice over our careers. Is there anything that you think back to that somebody told you that you go back to, and that's something you now impart, to the up and coming generation? Is there any piece of advice you would want to leave anybody who happens to be either in this room listening to this or later on when we drop the episode?
The three things that I think are really important in the world of innovation and business, or trying to just make it or break through if you've got an idea, I think one is you have to be persistent in what you're doing. You really do have to. If you have a great idea, you're super smart, you have something that other people may want, and you want to build that and grow that, I think persistence is really important. It's actually these 3 Ps that I pretty much live by in my journey. The next one is positivity. I think you have to be a positive person, and you have to look at the art of the possible, and you're going to get a million no's in everything you're trying to do, right? I think we all in our careers have those moments where people go, you guys aren't starting a podcast? Come on, what business do you guys have starting a podcast? Well, here you are now, right? Yeah. And we've had several moments of that. Even when I joined, I think we had some people question, like, you guys are a sports team. Why are you going big on technology? But now, 6 years later, I think the proof's in the pudding in terms of what we're trying to do and how we're being different and more advanced in some cases than others. And I think you also have to be. I think you have to use both of those things, but you also have to have them perseverance, persistence, and positivity. And you put, I think, those 3 things together, and I think you have the ability then to take your idea, work through challenges. I think you also have to be a humble learner. And lastly, I think you just have to be human, because it's not that big of a deal. Like whatever the thing that you're doing, don't take yourself too seriously. But learn from others. And I think you have to be open to learning from others and taking bits and pieces of things that you might learn from people who have maybe nothing to do with your field of work. But if you're open to learning from people, I think you can go a lot further in your journey. So those are the three P's I pretty much live by.
Well, you know he's in sports, ladies and gentlemen, because he got that under the shot clock that is right there. Humza Teherany, thank you so much for joining us on the Unlikely Innovators, and thank you for coming to make DiscoveryX even more special for everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.